My mom told me to go live in the streets after I moved in to help my dying dad, then bragged online that my sister stepped up and did what her useless son couldn't do. So I went nuclear. Sup Reddit, I, 29 male. And when my dad got stage 3 pancreatic cancer, I moved back home to manage his care. 2 months later, my mom told me to go live in the streets because I wouldn't get a real job and hand her my pay stubs. I'd already paid 50 grand in medical bills she didn't know about. Here's the setup. My sister Bridget is the golden child. I'm the screw-up. Always been that way. Doesn't matter what we actually do. My dad worked 40 years as a machinist, came home with metal shavings in his boots every night. When I told him I was doing cybersecurity consulting, he said, "That's good, son." Never understood tech, but trusted me. Mom? Different story. I'd find screenshots on her phone from support groups, messages about difficult adult children, Facebook posts about family sacrifice. Things go wrong, she blames me. Then posts about how hard everything is for her. Bridget's a dental hygienist. Mom posts about her independence. I run a cybersecurity company with actual revenue. Mom tells me I'm playing computer games in their basement. One example tells you everything. Bridget moved home to save money. Mom didn't charge rent. I visited for holidays. Mom said I should contribute to groceries. Dad tried to push back sometimes, but Mom shut him down fast. I moved out for good at 22 after I got my first tech job. Kept things mostly low contact with Mom, but I still saw Dad regularly. Lunch, talking about nothing, staying connected. Then, January 2024. Dad got diagnosed. Stage 3 pancreatic cancer. Aggressive chemo every 2 weeks. Someone to manage appointments, insurance, medications. The oncologist laid it out cold. 12 rounds of FOLFIRINOX, CA 19-9 levels they'd monitor weekly. Potential Whipple procedure if the tumor responded. Translation: brutal treatment, constant blood work. Zero room for mistakes on the medication schedule. Mom called crying. "Your dad needs you, please come." I floated other options first. Home health aide, rotating schedule with Bridget, even a part-time caregiver. Mom shot all of it down. "Family handles family," she said. Translation: free labor she could control. I moved in with one boundary. I'm here for Dad, not for family politics. Bridget stayed in her apartment, visited once a month, brought coffee, took photos, posted them on Instagram about fighting this together. Mom acted like she was Mother Teresa. I was there every day managing medications, coordinating with doctors, handling insurance, driving to appointments. The logistics that kept Dad alive. Mom called it sitting around the house. Here's what she didn't know. I run a cybersecurity company. Penetration testing for financial institutions, all remote. Revenue steady enough that I wasn't checking my bank account before buying groceries. But to Mom, I was refreshing job boards while Dad suffered. 2 weeks in, Mom cornered me in the kitchen while Dad was sleeping. "Since you're doing so well with your computer thing, you can help keep the house afloat." Not asking. Telling. I looked up from my laptop, middle of a security audit report for a credit union in Dallas. Medical bills are piling up. "You're here anyway. How much do you make?" "Dad's care is handled." "How much?" "What's in your savings? You got cash flow or nah?" She crossed her arms. "You're a grown man living under my roof. If you're doing as well as you claim, prove it. You're not auditing my life. Drop it." I went back to my work. She wanted control of the money flow, not help with expenses. I had a spreadsheet tracking every payment, every provider, every date, every confirmation number saved as PDF. Backup copies in cloud storage and encrypted drives. Meanwhile, I'd been covering Dad's co-pays for months. Close to 50 grand so far paid directly to providers. Mom didn't know because Dad deposited my checks and told her the insurance was better than expected. 2 days before the blow-up, I'd taken Dad to his oncologist appointment. Mom insisted on coming, stood in the waiting room complaining about chairs, wait times, and how the clinic didn't respect her. When the nurse called Dad back, she demanded to go in, started arguing with the oncologist about treatment timing because it conflicted with her book club. The doctor looked at me like, "Is she serious?" while Mom kept talking over her explanation of Dad's latest scan results. I had to physically step between them and redirect the conversation back to the actual cancer eating my father's pancreas. The oncologist, sharp woman who didn't tolerate nonsense, pulled me aside after. "Your mother cannot be in exam rooms anymore. She's disruptive. Your father's stress levels spike when she's present, which affects treatment response. I'm documenting this as a care team recommendation." "Good. I need that in his chart so there's no confusion." The oncologist nodded. "I'll have our patient advocate added immediately. She won't be allowed back during appointments." I'd already talked to the doctor, already rescheduled everything, already set up pharmacy delivery, and paid the copay directly to the office. I kept a go bag in my trunk, Dad's insurance cards, medication list, copies of all his records, emergency contacts. You don't manage stage 3 cancer without being 3 steps ahead. That night, Mom posted on Facebook, "Sometimes the hardest battles are the ones we fight mostly alone. Trusting God's plan even when others don't understand the sacrifice." 43 likes, 12 comments. Bridget commented, "You're so strong, Mom. We don't deserve you." I screenshot it, saved it with the date, opened a folder on my desktop labeled Documentation. I never commented, never posted, never argued, just saved evidence and let her keep talking. Then I caught something that made everything click. I was organizing Dad's pill organizer when his phone buzzed with a bank alert. He'd fallen asleep, so I glanced at it, just making sure it wasn't the oncology office. It was the bank. "Logan attempt from new device." I woke Dad up. "Did you try to log into your bank account?" "No." "Why?" I showed him the alert. His face went pale. "Your mother asked me for my password last week. Said she needed to check if insurance payments were processing. I told her no. Looks like she tried anyway." We changed his password immediately. I took screenshots of the alert and the timestamp. Then I enabled 2-factor authentication on every account he had: bank, insurance portal, Social Security, Medicare. Created a password manager for him, strong passwords on everything, recovery email set to my address. 2 days later, Mom cornered Dad while I was on a work call. I heard raised voices and came downstairs to find her holding a piece of paper in his face. "Just sign it. It's for the medical bills. I need authorization to talk to the billing department." I took the paper from her hand. It wasn't a billing authorization. It was a power of attorney form. Financial. Broad. Permanent. The document was pre-filled. Dad's name, address, SSN already typed in. Just needed his signature at the bottom. Real subtle. "He's not signing this. Mind your business. This is between me and my husband. You're not his caregiver. You're his liability." I looked at Dad. "Don't sign anything she gives you without me reviewing it first." Mom's face went purple. "You're poisoning him against me. I'm his wife." Dad spoke up, voice quiet but firm. "Stop. Garrett's handling it." Mom stared at him like he'd slapped her. I walked away. Took photos of the form first. That week, something else happened. Dad's infusion got canceled. I showed up at the clinic with him, and the receptionist looked confused. "I'm sorry, sir, but your appointment was canceled 2 days ago." "By who?" She checked her screen. Someone called claiming to be his wife. Said the appointment conflicted with a family event and requested we reschedule for next month. Next month would have been past the treatment window. The oncologist had been clear. Missed the schedule, compromised the protocol. Dad looked at me. I looked at the receptionist. "Who took that call?" I'm not sure. Let me check the notes." She scrolled. It says the caller was insistent. Knew his birth date and address. Our staff assumed it was legitimate. I pulled out my phone and called Mom right there in the lobby. She answered on the second ring. "Did you cancel Dad's infusion?" Silence. Then, "It was too close to Bridget's birthday dinner. He needed to be there for family. The cancer can wait 1 week." "The cancer can't wait. You could have killed him." "Don't be dramatic. It's 1 appointment." I hung up and turned to the receptionist. "I need to speak to your patient advocate immediately. And I need this documented in his chart. Unauthorized interference by a non-caregiver that could have compromised his treatment." The clinic manager came out, listened to the whole story, pulled up the call recording, confirmed it was Mom's voice demanding they respect the wife's authority over scheduling. They rescheduled Dad immediately and escalated their security measures. Hard flagged Mom's number system-wide, locked scheduling so only Dad or I could make changes, and handed me a printed incident report. After canceling life-saving treatment, this is now a patient safety issue. If she calls again, we refuse and document it as harassment. I folded the report and put it in my jacket. Added it to the documentation folder that night with a note: "Patient safety incident. Unauthorized treatment cancellation." That night, I told Dad everything I'd been documenting. Showed him the folder, the screenshots, the voicemails, the bank login attempt, the power of attorney form, the clinic incident report. She's not trying to help you. She's trying to control everything. Your money, your care, your decisions. And she's willing to compromise your health to keep that control. Dad stared at the evidence for a long time. His hands were shaking. Not from the chemo this time. Then he said quietly, "From now on, you handle everything. Medical, financial, all of it. Anyone asks about my care, they talk to you." We met with his oncologist the next day. Dad spoke first. Doctor, going forward, my son runs the show. Any questions about treatment, scheduling, medications? Talk to Garrett. He's got full authority. She nodded. I'll make sure the entire care team knows. Got the HIPAA authorization and healthcare proxy signed, witnessed, notarized. Completely legal. Completely documented. Dad was competent. His doctor confirmed it in writing. And Mom was now shut out of all medical decisions. The oncologist printed 3 copies of everything. One for Dad's chart, one for me, one for Dad to keep. She also added a clinical note. Patient demonstrates clear decision-making capacity and has chosen his son as healthcare proxy due to ongoing family conflict that has negatively impacted treatment adherence. When she found out, she lost her mind. Mom's face was tight with rage when she told me to leave. We were at their kitchen table. Same scratched laminate where I'd done homework for 12 years. Same chairs that squeaked. Same fluorescent light buzzing overhead like it had a grudge. You think you're special? Mom's voice was shaking. Spit flying. Face red. You think clicking buttons on a computer while your father suffers makes you better than people who actually work? She'd called my work computer games since I was 19. Dad sat there quietly, looking tired. Please, Dad started, voice weak. Be quiet. I'm talking to this ungrateful piece of garbage. She turned back to me. I let you move back in. Gave you a roof. And you can't even get a real job to help with medical bills? You're an embarrassment. I'm done pretending you're going to amount to anything. Here's what made this moment perfect. 4 days ago, my company locked down a partnership big enough that I wasn't clocking in anywhere. But to Mom, I was still the loser freeloading while Dad got chemo. You got 1 week, Mom continued. 1 week to show me proof of employment at a real job. I'm talking manufacturing, warehousing, something with a time clock and a boss who can fire your butt. Something that pays actual money for your father's treatment. Something with pay stubs I can verify. I got this weird calm feeling, like everything just went quiet. No, you're not getting pay stubs, and you're not touching his care. If you interfere with his treatment again, you'll be trespassed from the clinic and reported. I looked at Dad. We're leaving. Tonight. Mom's eyes went wide. What? Pack his stuff. We're done here. You can't just... Dad, you coming with me or staying? Dad's face showed relief. He nodded. I'm coming with you. Mom's face went purple. You're not taking him anywhere. This is my house. He's my husband. Your house? Dad bought this place in 1998. Your name's not on the deed? Never has been. I stood up. Dad, let's pack your medications first. Everything else can wait. I walked to the door while Mom screamed behind me. You ungrateful brat. After everything I've done. You can't do this. He's my access to the... She caught herself. Stopped mid-sentence. I turned back. Your access to what? Her face went blank. She knew she'd slipped. Nothing. You know what I meant. You're taking away my husband. That's kidnapping. But we both knew what she'd almost said. Access to Dad, to the narrative, to control over his care, and his finances. She'd built her whole victim story around being the suffering wife with the useless son, and if Dad left with me willingly, that whole story collapsed. You wanted me gone? Fine. But Dad needs actual care. Not whatever performance art you're doing on Facebook. So he's leaving too. It took me 40 minutes to pack everything Dad needed. Medications went in a cooler bag with ice packs. Temperature-sensitive stuff for the neuropathy. I grabbed his oxygen concentrator, portable tank, blood pressure cuff, thermometer. Medical records went in a folder. Clothes in a duffel. His favorite pillow because hospital pillows suck and sleep matters when you're fighting cancer. Mom followed me around the house narrating my betrayal to nobody in particular. Dad sat in his recliner, quiet, watching me pack with this look of relief like he'd been holding his breath for months. The porch light was still on when I helped Dad to my car. I got Dad settled in my Audi A5, fully paid off, nice enough that Mom would have called it wasteful, and drove him to my condo downtown. My place in downtown Austin sits on the 27th floor with windows overlooking the river. Not cheap, but worth every penny. Mom thought I was sleeping in their guest room full time, not spending 3 nights a week at my own place when I needed to escape. She probably thought I was sleeping with 3 roommates. I got Dad comfortable on the couch with water and his pills. Stay here, rest. I'm going back for your medical records and clothes. Lock the door. Don't answer for anyone but me. Be careful, he said quietly. Your mother, when she's angry? I know. That's why I'm documenting everything. That night, Mom called and I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. Garrett, it's your mother. You kidnapped your father. I'm calling the police. You stole him from his home. He needs me. not some selfish child playing house. Bring him back immediately or there will be consequences. We need to talk about money and your father's care. The phone bill is due. I'm canceling your line anyway. Perfect. Threatening to call police when Dad left voluntarily. Demanding we talk about money like she had any say. I immediately transferred my number to a business account under Apex Systems LLC as a business expense, done in 5 minutes. Next day, my sister Bridget texted, "Bridget, Mom's been calling me nonstop and crying. What the heck did you do?" I took Dad to my place. She kicked me out. He chose to come. You can't just take him. He needs his wife, not his loser son who couldn't even hold a real job. Interesting take from someone who visits once a month. Screenshot. Save. The next morning, I got a call from Dad's oncology office with the nurse sounding stressed. "Sir, your mother called 3 times this morning demanding to know where your father is. She's threatening to report us for patient abandonment. We need to clarify the situation. He's with me. He's his own patient and chose me as his caregiver. I have his HIPAA authorization. She has no legal authority over his medical decisions. We understand. We just wanted to document this clearly. Your mother was very aggressive on the phone. Said she'd sue us for letting you steal him. She also demanded we tell her how much you've paid for his care. We obviously can't disclose that. Document everything she says. Every threat. Every accusation. I'm building a file on her interference with his medical care. Already done. The social worker flagged her weeks ago. This latest call about wanting financial details when she has no authorization? That's concerning behavior. Good. Can you add a hard block on information access too? No updates to anyone except me or Dad directly. Already done. Between the scheduling lockdown and now this, any call from her gets refused immediately. The hospital was building their own file on Mom's behavior. That mattered. Over the next 2 weeks, Mom went full PR campaign. Facebook martyr posts about fighting this battle alone and sons who betray their dying fathers for money. Church friends in the comments demanding I be charged with kidnapping. 4 more calls to the oncology office demanding updates she had no right to, and 7 increasingly unhinged voicemails. I didn't respond once. Just screenshot everything, saved it all, and let her keep talking. Then she crossed from annoying into actionable. I got an email at my work address, my business email, that wasn't public anywhere. Subject: professional concern. To whom it may concern, I'm writing to inform you that Garrett, who claims to work for your company, has kidnapped his dying father and is currently holding him against his will. As his mother, I felt you should know the character of the person representing your organization. This man is mentally unstable and dangerous. Please contact me immediately to discuss this serious matter. She'd somehow found my business email and tried to sabotage my company. I forwarded it to my lawyer with one line. Add this to the file. My lawyer, kept on retainer since I started the company, responded, "This is actionable. Defamation, interference with business relationships, harassment. I'm drafting a cease and desist." The cease and desist went out that afternoon via certified mail. Professional letterhead, threatening language about legal consequences. The whole works. Cost me $400, but worth every penny to see her signature on the return receipt. Mom didn't just post online. She actually called the police. I got a knock on my door 4 days after taking Dad with 2 officers, looking uncomfortable. "Sir, we got a call about a potential vulnerable adult situation. Your mother claims you removed your father from the home without consent?" I opened the door wider. "Come in. My father's here. He can tell you himself he chose to leave." Dad was on the couch with his oxygen tank, looked up when the officers came in. The older cop did a quick visual check. Oxygen set up, medications organized on the side table. Dad alert and oriented. "Officers," Dad said clearly, "I left voluntarily. My wife kicked out my son who was managing my cancer care. I chose to go with him. This is where I want to be." The older officer nodded. "Sir, are you being coerced or held against your will?" "Absolutely not. I'm being cared for properly for the first time in months. My wife was interfering with my medical treatment. She was creating stress that made me sicker. I left to get proper care." He gestured at me. "Anything you need to know about my situation, ask him. He's handling everything." The officers looked at each other, and the younger one spoke. "Sir, do you feel safe here and want to stay?" "Yes, I want to stay here with my son. He's my designated caregiver." I signed the paperwork with my oncologist. I handed them copies. HIPAA authorization, healthcare proxy, all signed, dated, witnessed by Dad's doctor. The older officer scanned them. "This looks legitimate. Sir, you're clearly competent and making your own decisions. We'll document this in our report." They turned to me. Your mother was pretty insistent. Said you kidnapped him. I have recordings of him asking to leave, asking me to take him, choosing to come here. She kicked me out while I was managing his care, and he decided to come with me. That's not kidnapping. That's a patient choosing his caregiver. The younger officer pulled out his notepad, wrote something down. And you have medical documentation showing you're authorized? I handed him another copy of the healthcare proxy. The older officer nodded slowly. We'll note that in the report. He handed me a card with the case reference. If she calls again, we'll reference this visit. Honestly, this looks like a family dispute, not a crime. Your father is clearly making his own choices. I took a photo of the card immediately. Case number visible, date stamped, officer's information documented. After they left, I called my lawyer. I want to file for a restraining order. She's harassing me, interfering with Dad's medical care, filing false police reports. I want it documented and stopped. I can draft that, but you'll need solid evidence. I have 47 screenshots, multiple voicemails, documentation from his oncology office, the cease and desist we sent, the email to my company, and a police report from today where officers confirmed he's here voluntarily. Enough? More than enough. I'll file tomorrow. The hearing will probably be in 2 weeks. Good. One more thing. Get your father to appear or submit a written statement. A judge will want to hear directly from him that he chose this. Done. He'll be there. My aunt texted me. Garrett, your mother is telling everyone you kidnapped your father. What the heck is going on? We're only getting one side of this story. I texted back. There's a restraining order hearing on April 12th at 2 p.m. Courtroom 4B, Travis County Family Court. Public record. No drama, just facts. Come see for yourself if you want the truth. My aunt. We'll be there. I didn't push, didn't lobby, just gave them the option to see the evidence firsthand. Mom got served at her house 2 days later. The process server said she screamed at him, refused to sign, threatened to call the police. He left the papers on her porch and documented it all. I stayed completely silent publicly. Didn't post, didn't defend myself, didn't engage. I could have destroyed her story in one post. Could have shown the receipts, the voicemails, the clinic reports, made her look like exactly what she was. I didn't. Just let her build the case against herself while I organized the receipts. Around this time, Bridget's rent jumped from $1,200 to $1,850, and she moved back to Mom's. Posted on Instagram about stepping up when family needs you most, with the hashtag #FamilyFirst. Then texted me privately complaining she couldn't afford her place anymore. I screenshot both, the hero narrative and the broke reality, and added them to the documentation folder. Meanwhile, Dad had other plans. I took him to see an attorney, not for drama, just to lock everything down properly while he still had the energy. We spent 2 hours in that office going through paperwork. Dad updated his will, named me as executor, changed all his beneficiary designations on accounts and insurance policies. We did a comprehensive financial power of attorney, a living will, advanced healthcare directives, the whole stack. Then came the property piece. Dad pulled out the house deed. His name only, same as it had been since 1998. Mom had lived there 20-plus years acting like she owned it. But paper doesn't lie. I want Garrett on the deed with me, Dad said. If something happens, it goes to him. And I want him handling property decisions now. The attorney drew up the paperwork. Dad added me to the deed as joint owner with survivorship rights. We signed it, got it notarized, filed it with the county that afternoon. Done. I now had legal authority to make property decisions. Mom and Bridget had no idea. Dad looked exhausted, but relieved when we left. That's done. Now she can't touch anything. 2 days before the hearing, I got everything ready. Printed the binders, clean, professional, tabbed. My lawyer had filed the petition as case number 2024-18447-CV. Everything documented, everything time-stamped, everything admissible. The binders had sections: medical interference, 8 pages, financial misconduct, 12 pages, harassment documentation, 15 pages, false reports, 4 pages, third-party witness statements, 6 pages. Every page numbered, every exhibit referenced, every claim backed by evidence. I arrived 30 minutes early with Dad and my lawyer. Got Dad settled in the front row with his oxygen tank. My lawyer had 3 binders ready. Professional, organized, devastating. At 1:50 p.m., my aunt walked in, then my uncle, then my 2 cousins. They sat in the back, looking confused and worried. At 1:55 p.m., Mom arrived with Bridget and her lawyer, cheap suit guy, who looked like he'd been hired 3 days ago. Mom saw me and her face went red. Saw Dad and her face went white. saw our relatives in the back, and her face went purple. She hadn't expected an audience. The bailiff called us in. All rise. The judge was a woman in her 60s with a no-nonsense face and reading glasses. She looked at the case file and sighed. Petition for protective order based on harassment, medical interference, and false police reporting. She looked at Mom. Ma'am, you're the respondent? Yes, Your Honor. This is a misunderstanding. My son took my husband? We'll get to that. She looked at Dad. And you're the patient? Yes, ma'am, Dad said. I left voluntarily. I wanted to be here to set the record straight. The judge nodded. Good. Let's hear the petition. My lawyer stood up. Calm, professional, deadly. Your Honor, the respondent filed a false police report claiming her son kidnapped her husband. The patient left voluntarily with proper healthcare authorization. That's Exhibit A. The hospital documented multiple incidents of her screaming at staff, demanding private financial information, and attempting to override her husband's choice of caregiver. Exhibits B through D. She also called the oncology office and canceled a critical chemotherapy infusion because it conflicted with a family birthday dinner. The clinic documented this as a patient safety incident that could have compromised his entire treatment protocol. The judge's face hardened. She canceled his cancer treatment? Yes, Your Honor. Without his knowledge or consent. My lawyer pulled out a small speaker. The respondent also left multiple threatening voicemails. He played one. You're a kidnapper and a thief, and everyone will know what you did. The courtroom went silent. Additionally, Your Honor, payment receipts show the petitioner paid nearly $50,000 for his father's medical care over 6 months, while the respondent publicly posted that her son contributed nothing. The judge flipped through the binder, looked at Mom. Your son paid $50,000 for your husband's medical care, and you called him useless? Mom stammered. I didn't know. He went behind my back. Because your husband authorized him to. You had no legal right to this information. Yet you demanded it, interfered with care, canceled treatment, and filed false police reports. She looked at Dad. Sir, tell me what happened. Dad stood slowly, walked to the witness stand with his oxygen tank. Your Honor, I have stage 3 pancreatic cancer. My son moved in and managed everything. Appointments, medications, bills. My wife interfered. She screamed at doctors. She canceled my chemotherapy for a birthday dinner. She made me sicker. When she kicked Garrett out, I chose to leave with him. I packed my own bags. The police confirmed I left voluntarily. I'm still choosing to stay with my son. The judge nodded. Thank you, sir. She looked at Mom. Ma'am, do you have anything to say? Mom stood, crying. I just wanted my husband back. I'm his wife. He's competent. He chooses. That's it. The judge's voice was flat. Your behavior says control, not concern. Canceling life-saving treatment. Demanding financial access while your son paid $50,000 you didn't know about. That's financially motivated interference. She closed the binder. Based on the evidence, false police report, medical interference, harassing voicemails, defamatory email to his employer. I'm granting the protective order. 12 months. No contact. You may not contact your son directly or through third parties. You may not post about him on social media. You may not contact his workplace or his father's medical providers. Violations will result in criminal contempt charges. Mom gasped. You can't. Furthermore, I'm referring this to the district attorney. Filing a false police report is a crime. The DA will decide whether to prosecute. The judge signed the order. This hearing is concluded. The protective order is effective immediately. Mom collapsed into her chair, sobbing. Bridget glared at me like I was the monster. The bailiff called us to rise and the judge left. My aunt and uncle were staring at Mom with shock on their faces, like they'd never seen her before. We walked out together, and my aunt stopped me in the hallway. Garrett, I had no idea. The voicemails, the hospital documentation, the canceled chemo, and she called you useless? Yeah. Why didn't you tell us? Would you have believed me? Or would you have believed her? They both went quiet. My aunt hugged me. I'm sorry. My uncle shook my hand. Your dad's lucky to have you. Bridget stormed past us without a word. Mom came out last, looked at me, opened her mouth. Don't, I said. The order is effective immediately. Any contact is a violation. She closed her mouth and walked away. That night, I got texts from my aunt and uncle apologizing. Both offered to help with Dad's care if I needed it. My cousin sent a message. Always thought something was off about how she talked about you. Now I know why. I didn't text Bridget. She'd made her choice. The order went into effect immediately. Mom couldn't call, couldn't post, couldn't contact my work, couldn't contact Dad's doctors. For the first time in months, my phone stayed quiet. The DA charged her for the false report. She took a plea because the police report, the clinic documentation, and her own voicemails were basically a confession playlist. Probation, anger management, fine. She tried blaming me like I'd forged her voice. Bridget texted me one last time about how I destroyed the family. I blocked her. If you're only family when there's something to extract, you're not family, you're a subscription. Now came the cleanup. Dad and I already had the property locked down legally, but Mom and Bridget were still living in the house like it was theirs. Time to fix that. I drafted a formal notice to vacate. My lawyer handled the exact notice language for our county. 30 days. Clear deadline. Both their names on it. As joint owner, I had every right. Sent 1 copy certified mail. Had a process server deliver another directly to the house. Documented both. Professional. By the book. The notice was clear. They had until May 15th to remove all personal belongings and vacate the premises. Failure to comply would result in formal eviction proceedings. Mom and Bridget completely ignored it. Instead, the Facebook posts ramped up. Mom wrote about being forced from her home by a vindictive son, about losing everything to greed and cruelty. Bridget posted crying selfies with captions like, "Being punished for loving my family." I didn't respond, just screenshot everything, timestamped it, added it to the file. They kept posting. I kept logging. May 15th came and went. They were still there. I filed the formal eviction paperwork with the court the next morning. Cost me $285 in filing fees. Worth it. The eviction hearing was set for May 28th. I showed up with my lawyer and another binder. Same system, different case. Mom and Bridget showed up with their bargain bin attorney, who looked like he'd just figured out what joint ownership meant that morning. The judge reviewed the deed, the notice to vacate, the service records, and the timeline. This property is owned jointly by the petitioner and his father. The respondents have no legal claim to occupancy. The notice period has expired. Eviction granted. She set a move-out deadline per the order. Mom tried to argue. The judge cut her off. "Ma'am, this is a property matter, not a family matter. You were given proper notice. The time has expired. You need to leave." Bridget burst into tears. The judge didn't blink. We walked out. I had the signed eviction order in my hand. On May 31st, I changed the locks. Had a locksmith come out, rekey everything. New deadbolts, new garage code. Took photos of the house. Empty now except for furniture that belonged to Dad. They'd cleared out sometime in the night. Didn't leave a note. Just disappeared like roaches when you flip on a light. The house sat quiet for the first time in months. I drove Dad over to see it. He walked through slowly, touching the walls like he was seeing it for the first time. "It's mine again," he said quietly. "Just mine. Yours and mine," I corrected. "But yeah, no more chaos." We sat in his old recliner in the living room for a while, neither of us saying much. Then, 3 days later, the first crack in their story showed up at my door. I was making Dad breakfast when the doorbell rang. I checked the camera. Bridget, standing on my doorstep looking like she hadn't slept in a week. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. "What?" "Garrett, please. We're family. You can't just—" "I can. I did. Anything else?" She shifted. Tears started. "I don't have anywhere to go. My lease is up. I thought I could stay at the house until I figured things out." "Not my problem." "Come on, I'm your sister. Just for a few months. I can help with Dad." "No. You can be mad. You can't be involved." I looked at her evenly. "Figure it out yourself. Same way I did when I was 22 and Mom told me to leave. You're a grown adult with a job. Act like it. You're really going to leave me homeless?" "You're not homeless. You're just not my responsibility." She stood there for a second, mouth open, then turned and walked away without another word. I closed the door, went back to making breakfast. The next night, I was upstairs helping Dad organize his medications when I heard a car door slam in the driveway. Checked the camera. Mom's Honda Civic. She was standing outside, arms crossed, staring at the building. She knew the restraining order meant she couldn't contact me directly, so she just stood there, waiting. Like her presence alone would make me come down. I watched her on the camera for about 10 minutes. She didn't move, just stared. Then she started spiraling. She pulled out her phone. I watched her type. My phone buzzed. Text from unknown number. "Garrett, it's your mother. I'm outside. We need to talk about the house. This is cruel. I have nowhere to go. Your father wouldn't want this. Please." No reply, no yelling, no contact, just screenshots. Another text. "I know you see me. I'm not leaving until you talk to me. You owe me that much." Screenshot, timestamped. Saved. She stood there for another 10 minutes, texting 3 more times, each one more desperate. Then she completely lost it. She walked up to the call box at the building entrance and pressed my unit number. The intercom rang. I let it record her voice. Garrett, it's Mom. I know you're there. Just let me come up for 5 minutes. I need to explain. The house, the money? I can fix this. We can work this out. Your father needs me. You need me. I'm sorry about everything, okay? I'm sorry. Just let me up. Same woman who demanded my pay stubs now sounded like she'd pay cash for 5 minutes of control. I called my lawyer, put him on speaker. She's here, in my driveway. She's texted me 5 times from a new number and just used the building intercom. All recorded. All time-stamped. She violated the order. Call non-emergency. Report it. Don't engage with her directly. I called the non-emergency police line, gave them the case number from the protective order, explained the violation, told them she was currently on my property. They said they'd send someone. I stayed upstairs with Dad, watched through the camera. 20 minutes later, a patrol car pulled up. 2 officers. They approached Mom. She immediately started talking, fast, animated, pointing at my building. I watched one officer pull out the protective order on his tablet. Showed it to her. She shook her head, kept talking. The officer pointed at the text messages she'd sent. Her face went pale. They talked for another few minutes. Then they handed her something. Looked like a citation or a written warning. She took it, crumpled, started crying. They waited until she got in her car and drove away. One officer called my phone. Sir, we documented the violation. She's been issued a formal warning. We explained that the protective order prohibits all contact, including texts and intercom systems. Future violations could lead to arrest for contempt. Thank you. I have recordings and screenshots if you need them. Email them to this case number. We'll add them to the report. I sent everything within 5 minutes. Audio from the intercom. Screenshots of the texts. Video of her standing in the driveway. All time-stamped. All documented. Dad watched the camera footage later and just nodded like the problem finally got solved. That was the last time either of them showed up. Mom's warning got logged. Bridget vanished into whatever financial hole she dug for herself. The house stayed quiet. Now it's just me and Dad. His infusions happen on time. Nobody's canceling treatment for birthday dinners. Nobody's demanding pay stubs. Guys, we are so close to hit 100,000 subscribers on this channel. If you are not subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing. It really helps hit that 100,000 mark. Thanks for making this dream come true. My parents sued me after I refused to let my brother move into my house. Following yet another eviction, they accused me of abandoning family. In court, their entire case collapsed when my brother accidentally exposed their real motive. Hey Reddit, my parents actually took me to court because I wouldn't let my 31-year-old brother crash at my house after he got evicted for the 4th time. 4th time. And somehow I'm the villain in this story. At least I was until my brother opened his mouth in front of the judge and blew their entire scheme wide open. So I, 28 male, grew up in one of those families where the favoritism was so obvious, it could have been a case study in a psychology textbook. My older brother Kevin, 31 male, was the golden child who could literally set the house on fire, and my parents would blame the matches for being too flammable. Meanwhile, I was basically the family afterthought. Oh right, we have another kid's son. Growing up in suburban Ohio, I learned pretty early that there were 2 sets of rules in our house. Kevin's rules and everyone else's rules. Kevin could stay out until midnight on school nights because he was socializing and building important life skills. I had to be home by 8 p.m. because I needed structure. Kevin could quit every extracurricular activity he started because he was finding himself. I had to stick with band for 4 years, even though I hated the clarinet because commitment builds character. The double standards were so blatant it was almost funny. Almost. Kevin wrecked my dad's car when he was 17, drove it straight into a mailbox while texting, and my parents bought him a used Honda 2 weeks later, so he could learn from his mistake in a safer vehicle. I got a B+ on a chemistry test once, and my mom sat me down for a 2-hour lecture about wasted potential. A B+. I still remember her disappointed face, like I'd personally let down every ancestor in our family tree. School events were another joke entirely. Kevin would get average grades, nothing special, maybe a C+ average on a good semester. Every report card was celebrated like he'd won a Nobel Prize. My parents would take him out for dinner, buy him something nice, tell him how proud they were of his effort. Meanwhile, I was pulling straight A's, and the most I ever got was a nod of acknowledgement. Once I made honor roll for the 6th consecutive semester, and my mom's response was, Well, you're supposed to do well. Thanks for the enthusiasm, Mother. Holidays were always a production in the Kevin show. Christmas morning looked like Santa had a personal vendetta against me. Kevin's pile of presents could block a doorway while I'd get maybe 3 or 4 practical items. Socks, a calculator for school, gift cards to places I never went. One year I got a toolkit while Kevin unwrapped a gaming console, the latest smartphone, and somehow a dirt bike. My mom's explanation was that Kevin needed more because he appreciates things differently. I still don't know what that means. I'm pretty sure I would have appreciated a gaming console differently than a set of socket wrenches. Birthdays followed the same pattern. Kevin's parties were events. Rented venues, catered food, all his friends invited. My birthdays were an afterthought. "Do you even want a party this year?" my mom would ask every year, making it clear that the answer she wanted was no. By the time I was 14, I'd stopped expecting anything and just told them not to bother. Easier to have no expectations than to be disappointed again. My dad was always Kevin's biggest cheerleader. Every mediocre achievement got celebrated like Kevin had cured cancer. Kevin made JV soccer as a sophomore. Dad threw a party. Kevin graduated high school with a 2.1 GPA. Dad cried actual tears of pride. When I graduated salutatorian and got a full academic scholarship to Ohio State, my dad patted me on the shoulder and said, "Good job," before asking if I'd seen Kevin's new sneakers. I stood there with a full ride to a major university, and my dad was more interested in footwear. The thing about being the unfavorite kid is, you learn to stop expecting anything. You stop hoping your parents will show up to your events. You stop waiting for someone to notice your accomplishments. You just put your head down and handle your business because nobody else will. That's what I did. I worked part-time jobs through high school, saved every penny, and counted down the days until I could escape. Every shift I worked was another step toward independence. I had a job bagging groceries at 14, then moved up to stocking shelves. By 16, I was working at a local hardware store where the old-timers taught me practical skills. Plumbing basics, electrical fundamentals, how to fix things instead of just replacing them. Those guys showed me more attention in 2 years than my parents had shown in 16. One of them, this retired plumber named Carl, told me I had a good head and good hands, and that I'd go far if I kept my nose clean. That single comment meant more to me than anything my parents ever said. College was my ticket out, and I grabbed it with both hands. 4 years of engineering, graduated with honors, landed a solid job at a manufacturing plant as a mechanical engineer. While Kevin was busy bouncing between minimum wage jobs and asking our parents for loans that everyone knew were just gifts, I was building an actual life, real career, real savings, real future. By 25, I'd saved enough for a down payment on a modest 3-bedroom house in a nice neighborhood. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. Every mortgage payment was a reminder that I'd done this myself. No handouts from mom and dad. No loans that magically never needed repayment. Just years of hard work and careful planning. The day I signed those closing documents was one of the best days of my life. I had something that was entirely mine, built entirely on my own effort. Kevin's life, meanwhile, was a revolving door of disasters. He couldn't hold a job for more than 6 months. He'd get fired for showing up late, for having attitude problems, for creative differences with management at a fast food restaurant. The excuses were always creative, I'll give him that. Never once was anything his fault. The manager was on a power trip. The schedule was unreasonable. The job was beneath him anyway. Always something external causing his problems. Never anything internal. Kevin's housing history reads like a comedy of errors, except nobody's laughing. Eviction number 1 happened when he was 24. He'd rented a studio apartment and stopped paying rent after 3 months because he disagreed with the landlord's energy. I don't know what that means either. The landlord had the audacity to ask for rent on time, apparently, and Kevin found that aggressive. My parents paid off his back rent and let him move home. That first homecoming lasted about 8 months. Kevin did nothing productive the entire time. No job search. No skill building. Just gaming until 4 in the morning and sleeping until noon. My parents complained about it to each other, but never actually addressed it with Kevin. "He's recovering from a difficult experience," my mom would say. A difficult experience of not paying bills. What a trauma. Eviction number 2 came at 27. He'd moved in with a girlfriend who eventually realized she was basically supporting a grown man who played video games 14 hours a day. Her name was Ashley. Nice girl from what I could tell. Way too good for Kevin. She worked 2 jobs while Kevin contributed nothing but complaints about how tired she always looked. When she finally had enough and kicked him out, he owed her 3 months of utility bills. My parents covered those too, and welcomed their precious boy back home. The second homecoming was even worse. Kevin had developed an attitude about it, like he was doing our parents a favor by gracing them with his presence. He'd eat their food, use their utilities, contribute nothing to household upkeep, and then complain about the quality of the groceries my mom bought. These aren't the right chips, he'd say, like a $40 a week food mooch gets to have preferences. Eviction number 3 happened just last year when he was 30. He'd somehow convinced a buddy named Trevor to let him crash at his place rent-free in exchange for helping with chores. Turns out Kevin's definition of helping with chores was eating all the food and never cleaning anything. Trevor had given him a simple arrangement. Keep the common areas clean, take out the trash, basic stuff. Kevin couldn't even manage that. The buddy gave him 2 weeks to leave. Kevin stretched it to 2 months until the guy literally changed the locks while Kevin was out. Each time, my parents acted like Kevin was some victim of circumstance. Bad luck, wrong place, wrong time. The economy. Anything and everything except the obvious truth that Kevin was a lazy mooch who'd never learned consequences because they'd protected him from every single one. The mental gymnastics they performed to avoid holding Kevin accountable could have won Olympic medals. After eviction 3, Kevin moved back home again. My parents were in their late 50s by this point, supposedly planning for retirement, and here was their 30-year-old son camped out in his childhood bedroom like nothing had changed since high school. They'd complain about it to me during our rare phone calls. Kevin's having a hard time. Kevin just needs to find his path. Kevin would thrive if he just got the right opportunity. The opportunities Kevin actually needed were basic life skills and a wake-up call, but that wasn't something my parents were equipped to provide. They'd spent 3 decades making sure Kevin never had to grow up, and now they were shocked that he hadn't. Shocked, I tell you. I stayed out of it mostly. Sent a card on holidays. Called on birthdays. Visited maybe twice a year for awkward dinners, where Kevin would inevitably ask to borrow money, and I'd inevitably say no. My relationship with my family was cordial, but distant, which honestly suited me fine. I'd made peace with who they were a long time ago. About 8 months ago, my parents dropped a bombshell during one of our rare family dinners. They were selling the family house and downsizing to a condo in Arizona. They wanted to be closer to my mom's sister and enjoy their retirement years in the sunshine. Phoenix area, apparently. Desert living for their golden years. On the surface, this sounded completely reasonable. They were in their late 50s. The house was too big for 2 people. Arizona made sense for the climate and family connections. I actually congratulated them. Seemed like a solid retirement plan. Good weather, family nearby, lower cost of living. Then the other shoe dropped. Hard. So obviously Kevin will need somewhere to stay, my mom said casually, like she was discussing the weather. We thought since you have that extra bedroom, he could move in with you temporarily, just until he gets back on his feet. I nearly choked on my water. My extra bedrooms were a home office where I did freelance consulting work and a guest room I used maybe 3 times a year for actual guests. Neither of those was a Kevin storage facility. The office especially was important for my side income, which brought in an extra 15 grand a year. I wasn't about to convert it into a bedroom for my perpetually unemployed brother. That's not going to work for me, I said, probably too quickly. My dad's face did that thing it always did when I didn't immediately comply with the family agenda. A mix of confusion and irritation, like he couldn't quite compute that I had my own opinions about my own house. Why not? You have the space. Having space and wanting a roommate are 2 different things. Kevin and I don't exactly have a compatible lifestyle, by which I meant I actually paid my bills and maintained basic hygiene standards, but I was trying to be diplomatic. Kevin was sitting across from me, scrolling through his phone like this conversation about his entire living situation didn't concern him. Classic Kevin. Let everyone else figure out his problems while he checked social media, probably looking at memes while his housing future was being discussed. It would only be temporary, my mom insisted. 6 months, maybe a year, just until Kevin saves up enough for his own place. 6 months to a year. Right. Kevin had lived rent-free with our parents for the better part of a decade, across multiple stints, and had never managed to save anything. The idea that he'd suddenly develop financial discipline in my house was laughable. The man had never saved a dime in his life. Any money he got went straight to video games, food delivery, and whatever other immediate gratification he wanted. I'm sorry, but no. I'm not in a position to take on a roommate. I used corporate speak because I'd learned that direct honesty with my parents just led to arguments. Soft language sometimes bought more time. The dinner got awkward after that. My parents kept circling back to the topic, trying different angles. It would be so good for Kevin to be around a positive influence. It would help me too because Kevin could help around the house. The mental image of Kevin helping around my house almost made me laugh out loud. This was a guy who once went 3 weeks without doing laundry because he kept forgetting. He'd help around my house like a tornado, helps around a mobile home park. I held firm. No meant no. When I left that night, my parents looked at me like I'd personally betrayed them. Kevin just shrugged and went back to his phone. Typical. My parents moved to Arizona about 4 months ago. They'd found Kevin a small apartment near their old house and paid his first 3 months of rent plus the security deposit. A going-away present, they called it. A final helping hand to get him started. You can probably guess what happened next. Kevin lasted exactly 2.5 months before getting evicted again. This time it was for noise complaints, property damage, and failure to pay rent once my parents' prepaid months ran out. The landlord documented everything meticulously. Kevin had apparently been hosting loud gatherings multiple nights a week, keeping neighbors awake until 3 in the morning. He'd somehow put a hole in the bathroom wall, claimed it was already weak, and he'd barely touched it. The landlord had photos showing a fist-sized hole that definitely wasn't there during the move-in inspection. My parents called me the day Kevin got his eviction notice. My mom was practically hysterical on the phone, going on about how Kevin had nowhere to go and how he'd end up on the streets if someone didn't help him. My dad took over and used his serious voice, the one he probably thought commanded respect, but really just sounded constipated. "You need to let Kevin stay with you," he said. Not asked. Told. "No," I said simply. "He's your brother. He's family. This is what family does. Family doesn't mean I have to let someone move into my house against my wishes. Kevin is 31 years old. He needs to figure out his own living situation." My mom grabbed the phone back. "How can you be so cold? After everything we've done for you." That one almost made me laugh. Everything they'd done for me. The years of favoritism. The lack of support. The constant reminders that I was the lesser son. What exactly had they done for me besides occasionally remember I existed? I could count on one hand the meaningful things they'd contributed to my life, and most of those fingers would stay down. I'm not being cold. I'm being realistic. Kevin has been evicted 4 times. He doesn't pay rent. He damages property. That's not someone I want living in my house. The call devolved into accusations and guilt trips. I was abandoning family. I was being selfish. I was punishing Kevin for making mistakes. As if destroying rental properties and refusing to pay for housing were just whoopsie-daisies that anyone could make. As if 4 evictions in 7 years was just a string of bad luck. I ended the call by saying my answer was final, and I wasn't going to discuss it further. Then, I blocked their numbers for 48 hours, because I needed a mental break. Over the next few weeks, they tried everything. Flying monkeys in the form of distant relatives I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly started calling to tell me how disappointed they were in me. My aunt texted me a Bible verse about brotherly love. A cousin I'd met maybe twice tried to friend me on social media, presumably to continue the guilt campaign. Even my grandmother, who I genuinely loved, called to gently suggest that family helps family. I explained the situation, and she actually seemed to understand, though she still encouraged me to keep my heart open. Kevin himself called a few times. His approach was different. Less guilt, more promises. He'd changed. He'd learned from his mistakes. He'd get a job immediately. He'd pay rent. He'd be the perfect housemate. I'd barely know he was there. Right. The guy who couldn't keep a job for 6 months was going to suddenly transform into a model tenant. I wasn't buying it. I said no. Every single time I said no. My house, my rules, my decision. Kevin could figure out his own situation like every other adult on the planet. About 6 weeks ago, I got a letter in the mail that made me actually laugh out loud. It was from a law office I'd never heard of, informing me that my parents were considering legal action against me for familial abandonment and breach of implied familial duty. I had to read it 3 times to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. My parents were threatening to sue me because I wouldn't let my adult brother live in my house. This couldn't be real. The letter was written on official letterhead with fancy fonts and legal jargon, but the substance was pure delusion. I called a lawyer friend from college to get his take. He was equally baffled. Familial abandonment isn't really a thing in civil law, he explained. At least not in the way they're describing. There's no legal obligation to house adult siblings. This sounds like someone either gave them very bad legal advice or they found a lawyer willing to take their money for a case that's going nowhere. He suggested I respond formally through an attorney to make it clear I wasn't intimidated. So I hired a lawyer of my own. Nothing fancy, just a local guy named Richard who handled general civil matters. He sent a response letter that basically said, there is no legal basis for these claims, and any lawsuit would be frivolous. I figured that would be the end of it. Normal people would realize they had no case and drop the whole thing. But my parents weren't normal people. They were people who'd spent 30 years refusing to accept that their golden child had any flaws, and they weren't about to start accepting reality now. 2 weeks later, I got served with actual court papers. My parents were suing me for $50,000 in damages for intentional infliction of emotional distress and negligent failure to provide familial support. The claims were completely bonkers. They alleged that my refusal to house Kevin had caused them severe emotional trauma and had forced them to incur significant financial expenses to support Kevin themselves. The irony was thick enough to cut with a knife. They'd been supporting Kevin his entire life. They'd enabled every bad decision, covered every consequence, and protected him from every failure. But somehow my refusal to continue their pattern of enabling was causing them emotional distress. My lawyer reviewed the complaint and confirmed what I already suspected. This is nonsense. There's no cause of action here. They're basically suing you for not being generous enough with your personal property. No judge is going to entertain this. But we still had to respond. We still had to go through the motions. And that meant actually going to court. The discovery process was illuminating. My lawyer requested documents from my parents related to their claims, including financial records showing the significant expenses they'd supposedly incurred because of my actions. What we got back was a goldmine. First, there were bank statements showing that my parents had been funneling money to Kevin for years. Not just during emergencies, but regularly. Monthly transfers of $500, $800, sometimes $1,200. This had been going on for at least the past 5 years, based on the records they provided. Kevin wasn't just occasionally asking for help. He was basically on their payroll. Over 5 years, they'd given him roughly $45,000, maybe more. That's a down payment on a house. That's a master's degree. That's seed money for a business. Instead, it went to funding Kevin's extended adolescence. Second, there were emails between my parents discussing their retirement plan. And this is where things got really interesting. In these emails, they openly talked about how they expected me to take over Kevin's support once they moved to Arizona. They discussed how my house had plenty of room and how I was financially stable enough to handle the burden. They even calculated how much money they'd save if Kevin was living with me instead of in his own apartment. One email from my mom to my dad literally said, "Once he's settled at his brother's place, we can finally stop worrying about the monthly payments." They weren't suing me because they were emotionally devastated. They were suing me because I disrupted their plan to make me financially responsible for their adult son. This lawsuit wasn't about familial duty. It was about money. Cold, calculated money. My lawyer was practically giddy when he showed me these documents. "They handed us the entire case on a silver platter," he said. "This shows their motivation was financial, not emotional. They wanted to transfer Kevin's living expenses to you, and when you refused, they tried to force you through legal action. We prepared our defense accordingly. We documented Kevin's eviction history. We gathered testimony from his former landlords about property damage and unpaid rent. One landlord sent a detailed statement describing how Kevin had left the apartment in such bad condition that it cost $3,000 to make it rentable again. We compiled evidence of his employment history showing he rarely held a job longer than a few months. We built a picture of exactly why any reasonable person would refuse to house him. My lawyer also sent interrogatories to my parents, asking them to specify exactly what familial duty they believed I had violated, and to cite any legal precedent for their claims. Their responses were vague and mostly just repeated the same emotional arguments. They couldn't point to a single law or legal principle that required me to house my adult brother. The whole thing was clearly going nowhere. But my parents refused to drop it. They'd committed to this course of action, and their pride wouldn't let them back down. Classic. The court date arrived on a Tuesday morning in early fall. I took the day off work and showed up in my best business casual, looking like the responsible adult I'd worked my whole life to become. My parents were already there with Kevin in tow, sitting on the opposite side of the courtroom. My mom wouldn't even look at me. My dad glared like I'd personally offended his ancestors. Kevin was on his phone, obviously. Their lawyer was this older guy, who looked like he'd maybe checked out of his career about a decade ago, and was just coasting until retirement. Not exactly the legal dream team. He shuffled papers around and kept checking his watch like he had somewhere better to be. The judge was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s, who looked like she'd seen every possible type of family drama and was thoroughly tired of all of it. When she reviewed the case file before proceedings began, I caught her raising an eyebrow. Not a great sign for my parents. My parents' lawyer went first, laying out their case with all the enthusiasm of someone reading a grocery list. He talked about familial bonds and moral obligations, and the trauma of watching a family member turn their back on blood. It was heavy on emotion and extremely light on actual legal arguments. He never once cited a specific statute or precedent that required me to house Kevin. Then it was my lawyer's turn. He was methodical and precise. He explained that there was no legal requirement for an adult to provide housing to an adult sibling. He presented Kevin's eviction history, the property damage, the pattern of not paying rent. He showed the judge the emails where my parents discussed their plan to transfer Kevin's financial burden to me. Your Honor, my lawyer said, the plaintiffs aren't seeking justice for emotional harm. They're seeking to compel my client to assume financial responsibility for another adult. There is no legal basis for this claim. This lawsuit is an attempt to use the court system to circumvent my client's right to determine who lives in his own home. The judge looked unimpressed with my parents' case. She asked their lawyer directly, "Can you cite any legal authority that obligates a person to provide housing to an adult sibling?" Their lawyer stammered something about common law traditions and the spirit of family unity. The judge was clearly not buying it. Then came the moment that changed everything. The judge decided she wanted to hear from Kevin directly. This made sense since he was the person at the center of the entire dispute. Kevin was sworn in and took a seat in the witness box, looking annoyed that he had to put down his phone for 5 minutes. My parents' lawyer asked Kevin some softball questions. How long had he been looking for stable housing? What were his plans for employment? How had my refusal to help affected him? Kevin's answers were predictably Kevin. He'd been exploring options. He was between opportunities job-wise. My refusal had really hurt because he thought I was supposed to have his back. Then my lawyer got his turn. He started with Kevin's eviction history, walking through each one methodically. Kevin tried to minimize and deflect, but the documentation was clear. 4 evictions, property damage, unpaid rent. The pattern was undeniable. Then my lawyer asked the question that blew the whole case wide open. Kevin, where are you currently living? Kevin shrugged. With my buddy Dave. He's letting me crash on his couch until this gets sorted out. So you're not homeless? You're not living on the streets as your parents claimed in their filing? Kevin actually looked confused by the question. No, I've been at Dave's place for like 2 months now. It's fine. The judge's eyebrows went up. My parents' lawyer looked like he wanted to sink into the floor. My lawyer continued. And what do you understand to be the purpose of this lawsuit? Why are your parents suing your brother? Kevin shrugged again. I mean, it's pretty simple. My parents are on a fixed income now, and they can't keep paying for my stuff. They figured if they got the court to make my brother take me in, they'd save like $1,000 a month or whatever. Plus, my brother's got that house and he's not even using all the rooms, so it's kind of a waste anyway. The courtroom went dead silent. Kevin had just admitted under oath that the entire lawsuit was a financial scheme, not about emotional distress, not about family duty, just about transferring his living expenses from my parents to me. My parents looked horrified. Their lawyer closed his eyes like he was praying for the sweet release of death. The judge looked like she was simultaneously annoyed and almost amused by the sheer audacity of it all. So let me make sure I understand, the judge said slowly. Your parents filed this lawsuit because they wanted to save money by having your brother assume your living expenses? Kevin nodded like this was completely reasonable. Yeah, pretty much. They said they couldn't afford to keep helping me out and that my brother had plenty of money to take over. Something about fair share of the family burden or whatever. I could have hugged my brother in that moment. After 31 years of his nonsense causing me nothing but trouble, he'd finally done something useful. He'd torpedoed my parents' entire case with his own inability to keep his mouth shut. The judge called a brief recess. When we reconvened, she didn't waste any time. I've heard enough, she said. The plaintiffs have failed to establish any legal basis for their claims. There is no law that requires an adult to provide housing to an adult sibling. The claims of emotional distress are clearly pretextual, given the testimony that the real motivation was financial. She looked directly at my parents. What I find particularly troubling is the attempt to use this court to force one family member to assume financial responsibility for another. That's not what the legal system is for. Your son, she gestured toward me, has every right to decide who lives in his own home. The fact that your other son is family does not override that right. She dismissed the case with prejudice, meaning they couldn't refile. She also ordered my parents to pay my legal fees since the lawsuit had been frivolous. The total came to about $8,000. Not a fortune, but a meaningful amount for people who claimed they couldn't afford to support Kevin anymore. My mom was crying as they left the courtroom. My dad looked like he wanted to hit something. Kevin was already back on his phone, apparently unbothered by the fact that his testimony had just cost his parents thousands of dollars. I walked out of there feeling lighter than I had in months. It's been about 3 weeks since the court date, and things have gotten interesting. First, my parents sent a letter demanding I waive the legal fee award. The letter was 4 pages long, handwritten by my mom, full of guilt trips about how they were on a fixed income and couldn't afford this. She mentioned their mortgage. She mentioned their car payments. She mentioned how much they'd spent on Kevin over the years, like that was somehow my fault. The letter ended with, "We're still your parents and we deserve your respect." I forwarded it to my lawyer without responding. He sent back a formal response that the judgment stands and payment is expected within 30 days. They missed the deadline. Didn't pay a dime. My lawyer filed a motion to enforce, and the court granted it. They now have a garnishment order on my dad's pension until the $8,000 is paid off, about $450 per month automatically deducted. My mom called screaming about how I was stealing from their retirement. She was so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. She called me ungrateful. She called me cold. She said I was destroying the family. I waited until she paused for breath and reminded her that she could have avoided this by not suing me in the first place. She hung up. Second, Kevin got kicked out of Dave's place. Lasted almost 3 months, which is actually a record for him. Dave found out about the eviction history from someone at the courthouse who knew someone who knew someone. He gave Kevin 1 week to leave. Kevin called me asking for just a few nights while he figured things out. I said no. He called me a bunch of names and hung up. Third, my grandmother called. She'd heard the whole story from my aunt, who'd heard it from my mom's dramatic retelling. Grandma wanted my side. I told her everything, including the emails where my parents planned to dump Kevin on me. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said she was disappointed in my father for how he'd raised Kevin and how he'd treated me. She told me she'd tried to warn them years ago about the enabling. Nobody listened. Fourth, Kevin showed up at my house. Just appeared on my doorstep last Tuesday night around 9 p.m. with a duffel bag, looking pathetic and wet from the rain. He said he had nowhere else to go. His buddy Dave had given him the boot. He'd tried our parents, but they were still in Arizona. He'd even called Ashley, the ex-girlfriend, who laughed and hung up on him. I stood in the doorway and told him that wasn't my problem. He started yelling, called me every name in the book, said I was supposed to be his brother, said blood was supposed to mean something, said I owed him because I got all the good genes and had it easy. That last part almost made me laugh. A neighbor poked his head out to see what the commotion was. I waved to let him know everything was fine. Kevin noticed and lowered his voice, but his face was still red with anger. He tried a different approach, begging, said he'd sleep on the porch if he had to, said he just needed 1 night to figure things out, said he'd be gone by morning. I told him no and closed the door. He started banging on it. I called the non-emergency police line to document the incident in case he tried anything. He must have seen me through the window because he grabbed his bag and left before they arrived. The officer who showed up took my statement and suggested I get a Ring doorbell camera. I ordered one that night. Fifth, my parents flew back from Arizona. They're staying at a motel near their old house, trying to help Kevin get back on his feet. My mom called to tell me this like I was supposed to feel guilty. I asked her how the retirement condo was working out. She said they might have to sell it to cover Kevin's expenses. I said that sounded like a personal problem. She called me heartless and hung up. Sixth, I got a promotion at work. Senior engineer position with a 15% raise. I found out the same day Kevin got kicked out of Dave's place. Sometimes timing is just perfect. Last weekend, everything came to a head. My parents showed up at my house unannounced. Both of them, plus Kevin, standing on my front porch like some kind of intervention squad. They'd driven all night from their motel to catch me before I left for work Saturday morning. My dad was holding a folder of papers. My mom had been crying. Mascara streaked down her face. Kevin just looked annoyed to be there, probably because someone had woken him up before noon. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. I wasn't letting them inside. The new Ring doorbell was recording everything, which I made sure to point out. My dad launched into a speech he'd clearly rehearsed in the car. Family and responsibility. Blood being thicker than water. How I was tearing everyone apart with my selfishness. He said they'd brought documents showing their financial situation. Bank statements. Bills. Spreadsheets showing how much they'd spent on Kevin over the years. He wanted me to see how much they'd sacrificed. He said if I just agreed to let Kevin stay for 6 months, maybe a year, they could get back on track. They could save the Arizona condo. They could retire in peace. My mom chimed in between sobs. She talked about how she'd carried me for 9 months, how she'd stayed up with me when I was sick, how she'd driven me to school every day. She made it sound like basic parenting was some kind of extraordinary favor that I owed her for the rest of my life. Kevin stood there scrolling through his phone, completely checked out from the conversation that was literally about his future. I let them finish. Took about 10 minutes. Didn't interrupt once. Then I asked one question. Did you bring any documents showing what you sacrificed for me? My dad opened his mouth, closed it, looked at my mom. She looked at the ground. Kevin actually laughed. Dude, seriously? I ignored him and kept my eyes on my parents. I told them this was the last conversation we were going to have about Kevin's living situation. I wasn't going to house him. I wasn't going to fund him. I wasn't going to bail him out. Ever. If they wanted to keep enabling a 31-year-old man who couldn't hold a job or pay rent, that was their choice. But they weren't going to make it my problem. Not through guilt, not through manipulation, and definitely not through the legal system. My mom started crying harder. Those heaving sobs that used to make me feel terrible as a kid. Didn't work anymore. Kevin rolled his eyes and muttered something about me being such a tool. Then he said something under his breath about how I'd always been the difficult one. Coming from him, that was almost funny. My dad's face turned that familiar shade of red. He started to say something about how I'd regret this, how I'd be alone when I was old, how nobody would be there for me because I wasn't there for family. I cut him off. I told them they could either accept my decision and we could have some kind of relationship going forward, or they could keep pushing and I'd cut contact entirely. No more calls, no more letters, no more showing up at my house. Their choice, final offer. My dad threw the folder on the ground. Papers scattered across my porch. Bank statements, bills, all that documentation he'd wanted me to see. He stormed back to the car without picking any of it up. My mom followed, still crying, shooting me a look that was supposed to make me feel guilty. Kevin flipped me off and walked away, already back on his phone before he reached the car. They peeled out of my driveway like they were in some kind of drama movie. I picked up the folder and all the scattered papers, went inside and threw the whole thing in the recycling without looking at any of it. That was 5 days ago. Haven't heard from any of them since. My house is quiet. My savings are intact. My promotion starts next month. Got a date next weekend with a woman from my gym who laughed when I told her the abbreviated version of this story. Life is good. Guys, we are so close to hit 100,000 subscribers on this channel. If you are not subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing. It really helps hit that 100,000 mark. Thanks for making this dream come true.